It can be argued that such a situation had existed before the pandemic hits us. While that is true, it cannot be denied that the gap had widened further and wealth distribution had reached an alarming level of disproportion. The acutely disproportionate distribution of wealth threatens poor nations with public backlash and such. Left unattended, these nations would become failed states or continue to be one. Therefore, it is not a time of one-upmanship, the show of military prowess, or any other doctrinal superiority. It is a time when global leadership is defined and determined based on the abilities to help lift up other unfortunate nations out of the doldrums, poverty, and misfortunes, and get them back on their feet. And such a relationship will go a long way, a very long way with COVID-19 still around or otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, there is still a long way to go before we can assume that we are out of the woods. But that does not mean that things should come to a monumental stop when we attempt to overcome the pandemic. As it is, most of the developed nations which had managed to vaccinate their population significantly have embarked on a return to some semblance of normalcy that existed pre-COVID-19. Less developed nations, and we in Asia too, wish to be able to embark on our road to recovery. And I'm sure citizens from the developed nations hope to be able to return here, whether for business or for tourism. While businesses can be done online through nothing beats the time-tested personal interaction, tourism obviously cannot be confined online. But if Asia and the less developed nations open up too fast before achieving the same level of immunity as that of the developed nations, it will lead to another possible outbreak of new variants and such. In other words, the world will only heal when both rich and poor nations get back on their feet. If half the world remains sick, there is no guarantee that it would not drag the other half into another prolonged devastation. All these are, however, dependent on the leadership of each and every nation. If they have integrity, honesty, sincerity, and are truly concerned about the fate of their people, half the battle is won. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Mahathir talked about not just the leadership at the national level, but also the quality of leadership that we need at the global level. If there is a broadening gap between rich countries and poor countries, then the global health at the global level will be threatened. So I'm reminded of the lesson that nobody is safe until everybody is safe. So he gave us a very enlightening and comprehensive idea of how leaders in every nation should do to deal with this crisis. I think you can learn a lot from his insights. So we will have a Q&A session. I think we can get a lot of lessons from your extensive leadership experiences in the past. So we'll go back to the COVID-19 issue later, but let me first ask you about your leadership in the past, especially in the area of economy. Under your leadership as the Prime Minister of Malaysia, the per capita income has more than doubled. And in 1990s, it achieved an extraordinary average economic growth of 9%. Malaysia now has emerged as one of the most viable economy in Southeast Asia. So what aspects have you prioritized most in order to achieve these notable accomplishments during your tenure in office?
Well, like all countries, we want to do well, but we do not know how to do well. So when I took over, the things I did were the things that had been proposed before, excepting there were a lot of obstacles in the way. For example, there wasn't enough money. Because of that, we cannot build the 800 kilometers highway. Faced with that problem, we decided that the best way is to privatize, that the people who use the highway must pay for it. Those who are not using the highway should not be charged for the building of the highway. If we had increased the price of petrol, for example, then even those who are not using the highway will be taxed. That would not be fair. Once the concept of privatization and users pay is accepted, most of the infrastructure projects we have were able to take off and to provide the kind of base for the country to develop and attract investments into the country.
Thank you. Because both countries have experienced rapid economic growth, I think your experience gives a lot of insights to South Korea as well. And now Malaysia is one of the top 10 trading partners of South Korea, as you well know. As of 2019, the bilateral trade between two countries amounted to $18.1 billion. Would you be able to share your insights on how these two nations can bolster its relationship further? The bilateral relations between South Korea and Malaysia. In others, what areas do you think the two can add value to create even more robust tie?
Yeah. One of the most important things about relations between countries is the personal aspect of it. That is, the leaders must know each other, that the people must know each other. And if we travel to each other's country, we will be able to understand the differences in culture and way of doing things. Once we do that, I think we can learn from each other. So we always believe that trade is a creator of wealth. We need to trade. Malaysia exists on trade. We have always been a trading nation. So whenever we go to a country, we see the potential for trade. But trade must be two-way. We cannot just say, well, this country needs the raw material that we produce, and that's all. It's not enough. We also need to find what we can buy from that country. So here, the relationship between Malaysia and Korea is very good because we know each other much better now. We have Korean restaurants in Malaysia, but not many Malaysian restaurants in Korea. But people understand each other better. We have students studying in Korea. We have a lot of tourists from Korea coming here, all of which contribute towards personal relationship, which in turn contribute towards the development of both nations.
Thank you. Actually, I've been to Kuala Lumpur for academic exchange, and it was a fascinating environment for the cultural exchange, as you said. I think there will be more chances for mutual understanding and exchanges more if we overcome the pandemic. That is a big crisis situation now. Related to that, you have long been a strong proponent of the Asian values, and actually that's a subject that South Koreans think very much. How has the Asian value evolved over the years? And how do you think has this helped many communities in Asia confront the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic? Please.
Yeah. For centuries, the world was Eurocentric. We looked to Europe for ideas, for products, for a lot of things. And they have done well, and therefore we should look at them and copy their systems, their values, etc. But of late, we see a deterioration of their value system. Part of it has actually collapsed. We find that they are so very much wanting to be free that it denies the freedom of other people because they want to be free. You know, this incident where the Americans attacked Capitol Hill, it never happened before. But that is a reflection of the collapse of values. We find that in the West now, marriage is not respected. Most children are born out of marriage. Then there is no concept of family. Even family system is not accepted. This goes at the basis of our relation in a community. When we cannot even identify our real father, our natural father, and we do things which we have never done before, like, well, there is no need to marry. When you like someone, you live with that someone. If you don't like, you shift to another. So there is a total collapse of values in the West. Now, while in the past, we look to Europe for their value system, and in the past they were very good, but now it has deteriorated to the point where we find that Asian values are much more tolerable and can contribute towards a better society. That is why nowadays we see Asians developing fast and even overtaking the West. For example, we look at work as something honorable, not just to make money, but we want to produce the best possible because we take pride in our work. But in the West, it's no longer like that. It's all about rights, the right to work less and be paid more, etc. So those are the current values of the West, and we cannot follow them. We must retain our Eastern values, our Asian values, because from what we observe now, it is as Asian values which sustains and develops Asia. Thank you.
Thank you. As you said, the COVID-19 pandemic showed that there are some defects and problems in the Western democracy model. And as you said, the family becomes very important, and on that value probably will have another chance to overcome this COVID-19 pandemic. And I think you gave us a very good point in enhancing for the future the real values of the Asian civilization. Also related to the pandemic crisis, you mentioned in your keynote speech about the situation of Malaysia and the global situation of the crisis. So having mentioned about COVID-19 pandemic, can you share views on what we have learned through this crisis and how can possibly overcome this soon from your experiences?
Yeah, in fiction, we always talk about the world being attacked by creatures from other planets. And we have to be one world. We have to work together with the whole world. We cannot say, well, that creature is attacking only England, so let them attack only England. Actually, it is attacking the whole of the universe. But in this pandemic, for the first time, we are meeting with a common enemy. It is coming from within the planet, but it is our common enemy. It attacks everything, everybody, every country, rich or poor. And therefore, we need to have a central defense force to combat this, because we are fighting a common enemy. But unfortunately, we are not behaving like that. rich countries have taken, because they are rich, they have more money to buy more vaccine for themselves. Sometimes they think that, well, poor countries get the disease as long as our country is free. But there is no borders between us anymore. You let any country go down, you will go down. So what we need now is a much more centralized authority to ensure that common stand against this common enemy. And there are many things that we can do. For example, poor countries may not have any to spend on supporting their population. People who have lost their jobs don't even have food to eat, they're starving. The world must be concerned about that and will to help out. The rich must help the poor at this moment. This is a war by a common enemy. And the only way we can defeat a common enemy is to become united as one force and design a defense that takes in the problem of every one of us. So this is, we must remember, this is a common enemy, and we need a common force to fight a common enemy.
Thank you. I think your remarks are really impressive because you make us to see the pandemic from a global perspective. As you said, the COVID-19 is a common enemy for the global community. And I think by experiencing this worldwide crisis, probably there will be a better chance to establish a good quality leadership to confront and to overcome, as you said, this collective problems and crisis. Related to that, this is a foreign relations or foreign policy question, as you also mentioned in your remarks very well. Some countries can make full use of this crisis as an opportunity to expand their national power influences, and we should not do that, regardless of which country it is. And South Korea is very famous for suffering from US-China strategic rivalry, which is becoming more and more severe. And we want a more favorable and cooperative relations between the United States and China. I think Malaysia is in the middle of that great power strategic competition as well, because we now emphasize the Indo-Pacific area, the importance of Southeast Asia, and for South Korea also the importance of sea lane communication from Middle East to South Korea. So we are in trouble, South Korea. So I think we can learn from your experience as a proponent of a Malaysian foreign policy. Can you give us an advice how Asian countries can prosper and thrive in the midst of this great power rivalry?
Yeah, well, the most important thing is not to take sides. We neither favor America nor China. We don't take sides. But we will try to persuade them that the best solution is not through confrontation. Sending warships into the South China Sea is going to do what? Are you going to fight against China? Are you going to have a war against China? A war would be disastrous for the whole world. The warships cannot even fire a single shell at anybody, because you do that, you provoke war. And as you know, war, we have seen how war has destroyed the world, and in the end, nobody gains. Even the losers can gain if they know how. But war does not solve any problem. The only way to solve problem is to resort to negotiation. If that fails, through arbitration, and maybe through a court of law. That is the way to do for civilized people. But thinking that, well, differences between our country and their country can be solved by killing them is very primitive. We are not, we think we are civilized. But basically, we are very primitive, because how do we we solve this problem? Kill them. Just imagine if any society says that, well, if you have a problem with your neighbor, you just go and shoot them. What would happen in society? But the world is one society of nations. And if you have nations resorting to violence, to killing people in order to solve problems, this world will never be able to be stable, and all the people, including the winners, they are going to suffer. So we need to change our values. If we say that killing a man is a crime, killing a million men must also be a crime. So reject war as a solution to conflicts. Resort to negotiation, to arbitration, and to a court of law. We have to accept. Because in war, you may win, you may lose. In negotiation also, you may win and you may lose. But in war, when you lose and you win even, the whole place is destroyed. Millions will be killed. But in negotiation, you may lose, but nobody is killed. So at least we save lives. So I think this idea that wars can solve problems of conflicts between nations is outdated, is primitive, and we should get away from that.
Thank you. I think the prevention of war and peace and negotiation should the lessons that we, all Asian nations, including great powers, should keep in mind. Thank you. We are running out of time, so I think I have to ask you the one last question. That's actually open and broad question. After having served for Malaysia for so long, what is one thing you think you did well, making you most proud? Among many things, and if if there is something that you are not satisfied with, and why, please?
Well, I feel happy that in the period when I was a prime minister, the country was able to develop to the point where it was referred to as the Asian tigers. That is something that I feel satisfied with. It is job satisfaction, not what I get, but about having done something which you set out to do. They decided that, well, leadership gives them opportunities to do things which are not right. So they abuse their power, and now this country is called a kleptocracy, a country ruled by thieves. That is something that, had I known, I would have stayed on, even though I had served for 22 years. But of course, we know nothing about the future.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your time for participating in this conference. I think we have to end this session. I wish your health and success for your future, and probably we'll have another chance to share your views. Thank you very much. Let me call this session to close.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jeon Jae-sung and Dr. Mohamad. And now this marks the end of the session, and now we will take a short lunch break, and please note that the conference will resume at 1 p.m. We kindly ask you to come back to this hall prior to the session's beginning, and thank you and enjoy your lunch. 네, 감사합니다, 교수님.